Hey guys, before we start the podcast, Brooke and I wanted to take just 1 minute to tell you about a brand new resource from Million Praying Moms.
It's called Everyday Prayers for All Ages and Stages, and it's available now on Amazon or at millionprayingmoms.com in our show notes.
We want to make it as easy as possible for you to be a praying mom. So we've created prayers for each stage of your child's life that are designed to intersect the everyday moments you experience as a family.
From a prayer for bath time to a prayer for before the big game or to a prayer for your adult child to love and follow Jesus, we've got you covered.
Everyday Prayers for All Ages and Stages is available now, and it's going to be a treasured resource for your family in the days and years to come. Learn more at our show notes at millionprayingmoms.com. You're listening to the Million Praying Moms podcast, where we believe every mom is uniquely designed by God, but also a part of something much bigger than she could ever be alone.
We're authors and moms, Erin Mooring and Brooke McLaughlin, and we're here to help you make prayer your first and best response to the challenges of parenting. Tune in each week to real-life conversations with the experts about real issues Christian parents face today.
If you're ready to learn practical ways to focus on Christ as you seek wisdom and hope for the difficult job of raising children in today's world, you're in the right place.
Let's dive in.
Hey there, friends.
Welcome to the podcast. In this season, we're taking a look back at one of our very favorite series on the Million Praying Moms podcast, a series that unfortunately released right as the world descended into the coronavirus pandemic at the beginning of 2020.
Everything changed for our ministry during that time. And like many of you, we found ourselves reeling from the latest crisis in our world and just trying hard to help our families navigate everything that was happening. And because of that, we know some of you missed the important messages from the Everyday Prayer series on the podcast. So we're taking the next 6 weeks to re-release them with updated information and new resources to get these prayers into your homes.
In this series, we talk about what makes each stage of your child's life unique, challenging, and amazing, and offer prayers designed to intersect the everyday moments you experience as a family. Our goal is to make I don't know what to pray, or I don't know how to pray, or even I don't know when to pray, challenges of your past. We're going to be working our way through each individual stage over the course of the next 6 weeks. So if today's age group doesn't suit you, hold tight. We'll get there.
Let's dive into week 2, Everyday Prayers for Preschoolers. And Erin, just like the last week, it's been a while since you and I had preschoolers. Our homes are mostly full of teenagers now.
So we're going to have to go back and try and kind of remember what were the challenges? What were some of the biggest challenges of the preschool years?
Yes. Okay. So the first one we were thinking of is the beginning that process of letting go. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, I shared this last week. My firstborn, easy to put to sleep and slept through the night, all this stuff. Same thing. When he went to preschool, he was so happy to be there and he had no problems with that. And he is social. So I should have known that, but you're still figuring out who they are at that age. So, I just thought, oh, preschool, it's fun for kids to go to. And then came child number 2 and it was such an ordeal to drop off at preschool.
Right.
I mean, he really had no interest in being there. And he looked like I was, leaving him at death's doorstep when I dropped him off at preschool. Now, he did not cry. He was not really a crier. He just looked mad and he wouldn't talk to anybody. And I had a hard time just being like, okay, see you later, and letting go. Right. But when I did, and I came back at the end, he had a great time. And he was never like, oh, that was so fun. But he had lots of things to tell me about what he did and what he learned. And he never fought going there. But I did have to let him go with those feelings of, oh, God, he does not look happy with me right now. Right. But I need to let go. And this is good for him. And it was hard. It was a lot
Yeah.
harder for him.
It is hard. My firstborn was kind of, and still is, like yours, more social. Like he's really a social butterfly. I always tell people he gets that from my mom because I am just as introverted as they come. But so he got something great from my mom. And he's a people person, and he's a talker, and he loves to socialize and all those things. So preschool for him was like a huge adventure, and he loved it. He loved getting to leave our home for a little while. I think I was the one who was more emotional about letting him go. But, so my biggest challenge was just not projecting that onto him and allowing him to have the fun that he wanted to have. Now, by the time our second one came around, we had made a decision to homeschool for the first several years of their lives. So my youngest never actually went to a preschool. We did preschool at home. And for him, the process of letting go was almost more of me letting go of expectations that I had. So, for example, I love to read. If I had no other demands on my time, I would read nonstop. I love to read. And I really wanted to pass that on to my children. My mother did all the right things for me to develop and nurture a love of reading. She provided me with amazing things to read, great quality books. I never had a shortage of books to read in our home, and she was on top of that all the time because she is also a reader, and it was just a natural thing that we had together. But my kids did not love to read. I did everything that I was supposed to do. Like, you go look up, you go Google how to make a child love to read. I did it. I promise. I did it.
Yeah.
And there was never a time when they would not have rather used a book as a baseball bat and actually sat down and read it. To make them sit down, even on my lap for any amount of time, was like torture. And so that was hard for me. Like, I really wanted to share that with them. And I think as our kids grow up some, even when they're just preschoolers, they're beginning to be their own people. And when they're young, when they're infants and toddlers, it's almost like they're just an extension of our body. But when they are moving into those preschool years, they are starting to be more and more of their own people. And so we have to let go of some of our expectations for what we wanted for them and let them be who God made them to be.
Yes. There's lots of levels to this letting go thing.
Yeah.
It could be that you have a hard time letting them go and go somewhere and learn with somebody else. It could be letting them go when they don't want to be let go. Like, I don't really want to be at preschool, and needing to know that it's okay to let them go and experience pushing through those feelings, but also the letting go of expectations. Because you're right. This is the time when you really start to see their personality come out and their interests and all of that. It's just becoming really clear as they can talk more and explore more. And that leads to the next thing, dealing with curiosity. Oh my goodness. I feel like we got dumped on with curiosity in our family, which I should not be surprised. We've talked a little bit about the Enneagram before, and I'm an Enneagram 7, which is shiny new things. Yay, all of that. But when an Enneagram 7 is healthy, they tend to act like a 5 who gathers information. That is totally me. I want to know everything about everything that interests me. And I'm like constantly reading and gathering books on this. And I go through seasons where this is the thing I want to know everything about. And I should not have been surprised at how curious my children were and how abundantly that showed up in the preschool years of just wanting to know everything. And we kind of touched on this last time with the why questions.
We sure did.
Why? I mean, it starts in the toddler phase, but man, it really hits its peak in the preschool age.
It does, because their brains are developing. Like, that's the other thing we have to consider, is that, there are stages of development that are expanding their ability to understand. And they have the capacity to understand things now that they didn't or couldn't understand several years ago.
Yes. And because of that curiosity, you may be dealing with questions about their body, or your body or somebody else's, or about animals, about like, I mean, they just want to know everything. And sometimes it's a little uncomfortable.
It can be
I'm
a
just
little
gonna be
embarrassing. Yes.
really honest here that preschool age is when you start to get things where you're like, oh my goodness, you're making me blush because you asked this question.
Because they have no filter. They don't know when it's the right time to ask something and when it's not the right time, right? That's part of what we're teaching them.
Yeah. I remember, just things like going to the zoo and happening upon something that had to be explained and not really knowing what to say about it.
Yes, so. There are benefits to taking your kids to the zoo and or living on a farm, because some of the conversations that those of us who do not live on a farm do not necessarily want to have, you get to have really quickly when that happens.
That is very true. And so, I mean, that curiosity is so great because they are learning and they are expanding their brain. But the other problem that comes with curiosity is I don't know about you, but with my boys, it led them to wander off sometimes.
Yes.
And I just felt like not all of them, not all three of mine were like this, but one in particular, and maybe another one, I had to chase them everywhere.
Yeah.
Because they just were like, I wanted to know what that was. So I followed it and went after that. Or they run away when they're in trouble, or, and they have to be like physically, reined in because they're chasing. You have to chase them everywhere.
Right. Well, and my two were daredevils. They both kind of still are. Like, I have this memory forever etched in my mind of we had finished school for the day, and we had neighbors who were our very best friends, and they public schooled at the time, and they still do actually. But she was the mom was a teacher, and they were in public school, and our kids would be so excited every day when they got home from school because it meant they could have some playtime with these kids that they basically were born into friendship with. And so I had let them go outside a little bit early in anticipation of our neighbors getting home. And before I knew what happened, my oldest son had shimmied up the tree in our front yard. And I'm not kidding, like, he is a climber. And he had just shimmied right up the tree. And right as they were pulling in the driveway, he fell out of it, Erin.
Oh my gosh.
I'm talking about a 10-foot drop.
Oh,
like he just plopped on the ground. And of course, like, I think my neighbor just stopped. We lived in a cul-de-sac. She didn't even pull in the driveway. Everybody saw it happen. It was as if it was in just slow motion. We all just saw it happen. I came flying down off the porch. She stopped, slammed her car into park and got out. And we all go running to him, and he's fine. Like, he's absolutely nothing happened. It didn't even really knock the breath out of him. He's so resilient. They're so resilient when they're
I was just going to say, preschool moms, they're very resilient.
Yes.
We don't recommend falling out of a tree, but they are resilient.
Yes. They can survive a lot. You do need to chase them. Especially if they are daredevils like mine were, who would, get into trouble at any little turn. My younger son fell out of a window in our house. Like, these were just, I turned my back for 5 seconds and he fell out of the window, busted right through the screen and fell out of the window. I just turned around and he wasn't there anymore. So
in case you are wondering, you will not find any mom judgment from us here, because stuff happens and it happens really quickly.
Yes.
And they are exhausting.
Yes. And one of the things that happens to all moms is number 4, tantrums.
Okay. Can we talk about tantrum styles? Okay.
Yes.
Because I didn't realize how many different temper tantrum styles there were for children until I had 3 different ones in my household.
Yeah.
I had the very physical one where sometimes I had to hold him down,
right,
to like get him to just calm down and listen to me. Thankfully that season of life did not last very long, but like, it just was like a very physical reaction. Okay. So that was number 1. Number 2 was a silently drop to your knees and then crumble to the floor with your head on the floor and just not move. And I was like, what is going on? Like, why are you not like flailing about and all this? This was his temper tantrum style. It was, I am so devastated. I can't say anything or move or anything. And so that was number 2. Number 3 was a argue till you drop kind of thing. Like, but I did this, but this is why I did it. But, just like using all the words God gave him in vocabulary and to prove why he was right in this moment.
Yes.
And it was very wordy. So I was like, how could 3 children born into the same family have such different temper tantrum styles?
Yeah, I agree. We only have 2 in our home, but they have 2 different temper tantrum styles. I have one that was very physical, where I would, have much the same experience that you said, which was almost having to hold him, or, I would often carry him up the stairs kicking and screaming. Like I would get kicked and I would get bitten and all this, like and he still, even though he's 12 now, he would never kick me or whatever anymore, but he still tends to be more of a physical child than
like
the other
reaction
one.
is physical.
It's a physical reaction. My older son is more that verbal arguer. I always say, he is going to be the kind of man that stands up for what he believes in. Our job right now is just to make sure he's standing up for the right things because he thinks he's right, but he's not. He's willing to fight to the death over it. But then he realizes a couple days later, I may not have been right about that, that kind of thing. So,
So I want to piggyback on that, because along with the challenges of temper tantrums is the challenge of dealing with consequences at that point, because they're just starting to really understand that. And none of my kids handled consequences the same way. One of them was not affected by timeouts at all. He could care less if he was getting sent to timeout. That was not a consequence to him. And another one, it was devastating if he got sent to timeout. And that was just the end of the world. Do not make me go to timeout. This is so terrible.
I feel I could maybe guess which ones based on the way you just shared with us that they tantrumed, though. That tells me a little something about their personalities. You know
what? I would have thought so, but I don't know. It's just it's once you have one kid figured out, then you think, okay, this is how we're going to handle. When they talk back, this is the consequence we're going to give them. And you've got it figured out when they're 4 years old. And then their brother comes along and you're like, this is how we handle when they talk back. And it's wait a second, that didn't affect you at all? You want it to get through to them. And that's when their little personalities are just shining through in both how they act out and how they react to consequences and whether they're effective or not. And it's exhausting trying to figure out what works.
Each child. Yeah. And you know what I realized the other day? I had a moment with my 12-year-old where we kind of had a come to Jesus moment over something in his life. And we were having one of these really great conversations. And he is not a conversationalist. I really have to draw. My older son talks a lot. My younger son is more reserved in talking. And it's okay. God made them that way. I'm not trying to force them to be one way or the other, but this was one of those particular moments where we were really having a nice conversation, and he was opening up. And I reminded him of how hard I've been fighting for him all of his life. And, and I said to him, sweetie, what about all those times that this happened and you would kick me and scream and fight me when I was trying to, reason with you or whatever? And Aaron, he didn't remember it.
Wow.
He doesn't remember that.
Yeah.
And that was I am a talker. I have been accused many, many times of having lots of words.
Me too.
But it stopped me in my tracks when he said that, because I thought, I remember that still so shapes the way I think about my relationship with him. But I think I need to let that go because he doesn't even remember it.
Yeah.
And so I was just blown away that he has no memory of all of those times that I struggled, with his tantrums. And it was just really eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
Have the words, God, I need you to do something in my children, ever found their way into your desperate prayers? Do you feel helpless to know how to equip your children for this world and everything it's going to throw at them? Have you ever prayed, God, I can't be the mom they need. I need you to help me. If so, you're not alone. The good news is that there is a way to stay connected with the one who has all the answers so you can be the mom you need to be. When my children were little, I was faced with the undeniable fact that my best efforts fell woefully short of my goal to produce godly children.
I knew if God didn't show up, nothing would change in my home. So I began to pray scripture for my children, and both my life and my children's lives were transformed. Yours can be too. Over the years, I've learned that while prayer is the most important part of Christian parenting, many moms feel stifled in their prayers and so continue to feel helpless and hopeless. Do you feel like you don't know what or how to pray? Like you don't know if your prayers really matter? Like you can't pray until you get your life together? Or maybe you just feel like you're too busy to pray. Praying Mom will have you making prayer your first and best response to every aspect of family life and thriving as a mom full of hope in the God who can, even if you can't. Praying Mom will have you making prayer your first and best response to every aspect of family life and thriving as a mom full of hope in the God who can, even if you can't. You can order it now anywhere books are sold, and when you do, you'll get access to some pretty amazing bonuses like audio prayers. That's me praying every single prayer in the book over your family, and you'll get a bonus chapter called How to Pray God's Word. Go ahead and order your copy of Praying Mom today. Just visit brookemclaughlin.net/praying-mom to get started.
I want to give an encouragement to the mom that is dealing with that kid that needs to be physically restrained sometimes and acts out in big ways with their tantrums, because the child that was like that for me, I have the closest relationship with now. And yeah. I never thought that would happen. Because we were homeschooling and we were together a lot and everything, it felt like we are going to be fighting like this for the rest of my life. I really, honestly, in those moments thought that, and God just changed things around in a really, really big way, and whatever the reason was. But I want to encourage the mom that feels like they have a preschooler who will never stop arguing, or whatever age, right, that there is hope, and that, God can redeem even those things that feel like they're never going to end, the fights that are never going to end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of the reason for the tantrums at this age leads us into our next point, which is they have this desire to be independent from us, but they don't have the ability to think rationally just yet.
True.
And so that's really what a temper tantrum is, isn't it? I mean, it's them wanting to do what they want to do or get their own way, and us saying no for good reasons, but they can't see that. They don't trust that it's a good reason yet. All they can see is that we are not giving them their way. And that's a huge gap in communication in that particular age group that it's sometimes difficult to bridge, because they don't even have the ability. Like with my 14-year-old now, I can reason with him. He can see reason. Sometimes we have to get past the emotion before we can see reason, but we will eventually get to the point where he can see reason, and I can see reason. But with a preschooler, they don't necessarily have the ability. They just don't have the developmental brain power yet to do that, and it can be a real challenge.
Right. They've gotten past the point where everything is new to them, and they're starting to be like, oh, I got this. I kind of want to push this a little bit into the kindergarten year even, because as a teacher, I would watch these kindergartners come in and be in that kind of stage where it's like everything's new again. And a preschooler is going through the same stage. But I can say from a teacher standpoint what it looked like for a kindergartner. Come in and everything's new, and they're wide-eyed and they're discovering it. And it's like, wow, this is amazing. And as the year goes on, they are like, oh, I know how this works. And they get more independent. I know where this is, and I know how to do this. And they can make some choices then where it's not the best choice because they think I can handle this. I got this. But they're not thinking through the whole consequence of it and everything. So sometimes you'd get some attitude. Sometimes you'd get them like getting up and going to the bathroom and not telling a teacher. And you have a kid that's lost now because nobody knows where they went, because they're like, I'm independent, I got it. But they didn't think through all the parts of it.
Right.
And that's what we see in preschoolers, and that kindergarten year is like, they're discovering I can do this on my own, but they're not thinking, should I do it on my own?
Right.
Or what's the right way to do it?
Right. I'm sure that when my son shimmied up the tree and then crawled out onto the branches, like he just saw a challenge and he knew in his little mind, I can totally do this.
Yes.
And he was right. He did have the ability to climb up the tree. But what he didn't think through is that the branches were much thinner toward the outside of the tree and they wouldn't bear his weight. And that's when he fell. Like he just didn't think through it. And it's our job to help them do that.
That is such a perfect illustration.
Yeah, but it's hard. Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, really, we talked about this last time too. These memories come back to us so strongly. And we just feel like these are the things that are kind of universal. Like every kid goes through curiosity and wanting to know everything. And every kid is on the go and has a lot of energy. And every kid throws a temper tantrum at some point. If they don't, I mean, can you tell us your secrets if you are that mom that has a kid who never throws a temper tantrum? But these are things that every mom goes through and feels the weight of as they're raising a preschooler. And we know that the preschool years can be hard. And because of that, we wanted to create everyday prayers for you that intersect those weary moments.
Absolutely. We specifically wanted to offer you the opportunity to turn an everyday moment, one that can often feel tedious or overwhelming, into a holy moment so that you begin to see God at work in the everyday moments of your day. And Erin, our thought with these prayers is, what is that mom feeling? What is that mom thinking? What is it going on in her heart at this moment? And what does God's word have to say about that we can turn into a prayer?
Right. So we like to think of it as a put off and a put on kind of exercise. So you're choosing to see something as God sees it instead of how weariness might tempt you to see it. Like you're putting down your own thoughts and putting on, kind of the vision of God in this moment.
Yeah. And if, I always like to liken it to putting on your glasses, right?
Yeah.
So I can't see very well without my glasses. I can see, but everything's blurry. And when we're in the midst of that weariness and just being tired and emotionally overwhelmed, we cannot see things clearly. So let's take a moment and put our glasses on. We've created a list of 10 of these everyday prayers for preschoolers, and we're going to share a sample of them with you right now.
All right, so let's start off at the beginning of the day. This first prayer is a prayer for while making breakfast. And I want to say that this is such a good one to start with the preschool age, because they start to tell you what they think about what they're eating. And that can be a really crummy way to start the day by fighting over breakfast. So this prayer is a perfect one while making breakfast. Father, give my child a heart of contentment even at this young age. May she be anxious for nothing, and as she grows, be an example to others in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. And the references for that one were Philippians 4:11, Philippians 4:6, and 1 Timothy 4:12. Oh, heart of contentment.
So good, right?
I love it. Like, just let them be thankful for this food I'm about to put in front of them. That's just what I was picturing in my head.
Yes. And that, I'll tell you what, guys, that one was important to me because food time was the biggest tantrum time in our home because they never liked what I fixed for them. So unless it was sugary cereal or whatever, and I wasn't going to do that. So
I have to tell a story quick there because this illustrates that preschool age here where one of my children asked for like the cup of mandarin oranges or peaches. I'm trying to remember which one it was. It might have been peaches in a cup and asked for that for breakfast. And then when given it, refused to eat it. And that standoff lasted about an hour and a half. And that child and one parent were late for church because that child asked for it and then refused to eat it. And we were not going to let that go. We had a nice little standoff there.
Yes, we've had those in our home too.
I think it would have helped to have that prayer before I went into that battle.
See, that's why we're doing this. That's great. Okay, so our next prayer is for preschool drop-off. And again, we talked about how, the process of letting go can look or feel different in different circumstances and for different children and different families. But there's always this need for peace in that season. So that's what we focused on. The prayer here is, Father, give my baby peace in knowing that you will never leave him or abandon him. Fill him with all joy and peace as he trusts in you, so that he may overflow with hope by the power of your Holy Spirit and be a light to those around him. And the references there are Deuteronomy 31:6, Romans 15:13, and Matthew 5:16. Now, I do want to say this. I don't necessarily think that our kids at that young age will always know how to be a light to others, how to be a light for Jesus to others. And I think sometimes we can put too much expectation on them when they may not even be saved yet. They may not even have a personal relationship with Christ. But we would always, and I got this from a good friend of mine, Jamie, give you a shout out in case you're listening. She would always tell her children when she dropped them off, be a light. Be a light. And we would add to that, be a light, not a distraction, because it's easy. Like, it's one thing to be a light, but it's sometimes you can be such a distraction that you're keeping other people from getting what they need to get. So like in church or Sunday school or whatever, be a light, don't be a distraction. So we would always add that to our kids.
Yes, that's very good. Like, we want you to shine for Jesus in a way that does not disrupt class.
Right.
Yeah, I can just picture that now, coming from a noted talker in class, because, that would have been me. All right. Well, on that note, we have a prayer for getting ready for church. Oh boy. I think the enemy attacks at that getting ready for church time, because that's when most of the fights and the disasters happen, and we need a prayer for that time, because we just need Jesus to fix that whole time. So, and
this may be a show about preschoolers, but I need to tell you guys, I am praying this prayer next Sunday morning. Yes. It is still an issue in our home.
All right. A prayer for getting ready for church. Father, let the peace of Christ rule in our hearts, and let us be thankful this morning as we meet together with other believers. May we be imitators of you, Lord, putting on compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. And our references for that are Colossians 3:15, Hebrews 10:25, 1 Thessalonians 1:6, and Colossians 3:12. And I got to also just say, we mentioned this in our last podcast, but the idea of saying these things out loud in front of your children and with them around, that whole line about let us be thankful this morning as we meet together with other believers. There were days when my preschoolers started to put up a fight about, I don't really want to go anywhere right now. I don't want to, why do we have to leave the house this Sunday morning? I want to build with blocks or whatever, that type of thing. And helping them frame that experience as something to be thankful for is really important.
Yeah.
And letting them know it's not only important, we should be grateful that we get to meet together with other believers today.
Yeah. Yeah. And just even saying the verse or praying the verse where you're saying, let's put on compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. You may have to stop and explain what those mean in toddler language. Mm-hmm. But again, you're setting a standard for your child and saying, this is our goal. We may not always meet that goal every Sunday morning. We may fall short of it on a regular basis, but this is what we're working towards. And I just love that idea. I always love to give my kids expectations. I will say to them, I have said to them for years when we're going somewhere, okay, guys, this is my expectation for how we're going to behave while we're here. They probably roll their eyes because I say it a lot, but at least they always know what I expect of them. They don't always do it, but I always tell them, this is what I expect of you in this situation. So the next one is before a play date. And I love this one because Aaron, you've heard me talk about this before. I have two of what I like to call those boys. Like, they're super aggressive. They're the ones that are running around like crazy on the playground. That's who they were. My oldest son made friends super easily, and like that, they were just in your face, always have that aggressive, impulsive nature about them. And I always wanted to take them to the playground, but I always felt this sense of dread. Like, what is going to happen? Who are we going to knock over? Who is going to,
Yes.
that kind of thing, because those were my boys. Mine were the ones that could be expected.
Preschoolers are unpredictable.
They are.
They are. And it's just, you just never know what's going to happen. I always felt like, I like what you said about the expectations thing, but I also felt like there were all these times where I was like, I didn't even know I needed to prepare them for whatever, like fill in the blank. And the next time we went somewhere, it was like, oh, add another thing to this is what we need to prepare for. Because you just never know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
You never know what they're going to encounter. And when they're with other kids their age, stuff is going to come up that you're like, whoa, I didn't even know we needed to pray for that.
Right. And I think sometimes, like, I remember saying, and I see these memes on Facebook a lot too, like this sentence that I never thought I would have to say together or whatever,
Yes.
like just these moments that you're like, I would never have in a million years dreamed that this could possibly be happening at the same time or whatever,
Right.
or that I would ever have to say to my child this or whatever. So, it's funny, but we can pray and we can invite God into our hearts to give our hearts calmness so that we're not, overbearing on our children or projecting things onto them, but we can also pray for them and again, set that standard. So I love this one. It says, Father, help us to have good sense. Amen, right? Help us to have good sense. Make us slow to anger and give us the ability to overlook an offense. Help us to be self-controlled, worthy of respect, sensible, and sound in faith, love, and endurance. And again, you may have to explain what some of those words mean to your preschooler, but it can be done. And the references there are Proverbs 19:11 and Titus 2:2.
I feel like that give us the ability to overlook an offense is a good opportunity to explain before a play date the difference between tattling on someone and telling on someone. When somebody does something that you don't really like, but they didn't hurt you and they didn't hurt anybody else, and we need to teach them early when you can handle it yourself and say, I don't like it when you do that. Or even things that can just be ignored, like, they're doing this, but it's totally far away from me. It has no impact, but I just don't like it.
Right.
But that part of that prayer about giving us the ability to overlook an offense is a good chance to explain, if somebody's being hurt, that's when we tell about the offense. That's,
Mm-hmm.
or it's not safe, if there's something not safe going on. But if it's, they're playing with the red blocks and you think they should only play with the blue blocks, you can overlook that offense, even though it's not really an offense. But our kids need some help.
They feel like it is.
They feel like this person should only have red. I mean, they're not thinking rationally, like we said. But we get into that where they are on a play date and it gets ruined because they're tattling on everything
Mm-hmm.
they don't think should be happening. So this prayer is a good jumping off point for explaining the difference to them.
It is. And I want to say this as well. I know I've said multiple times that you may have to pause and explain the language that we're using in these prayers. And so I think a good question someone might be asking is, well, if I'm going to have to explain this language, why did you use this language in these prayers, right? Like, why did you not come up with something that was a little easier for my toddler or my preschooler or whatever to understand? And my response to that is that I have always really wanted to use biblical language whenever I can with my kids, knowing that I'm going to have to explain it, but getting them used to hearing what those words mean. And I think we have a problem in our society today because people will say that the Bible is irrelevant. It doesn't speak to what I'm going through. And the fact of the matter is that it does speak, whether directly or indirectly, it does speak to what we're going through and what our children are going through. It just uses different words sometimes than are the ones that we commonly use in our culture. So that's why for these prayers, I chose to go ahead and just use the biblical language because I want them to get used to hearing it and knowing what it means.
And we know that the Word of God is living and active.
Yeah.
And like, even if they aren't fully comprehending it right now, it's still working in their hearts when they hear it. And like you said, they're going to hear it other places as they go through church. And what better place to get an introduction than with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Erin, we've talked about before how much we would have loved to have had something like this when our kids were this age, just prayers that we could have printed out and hung in our children's rooms, or at the dinner table, or in the bathtub, or above their beds, or wherever, to make an everyday mundane moment more holy.
We are so excited to get these prayers in your hands. We've broken down the ages and stages of a child's life from infancy to adulthood and created a resource you can use throughout the moments of your day to help you make prayer your first and best response to motherhood.
Everyday Prayers for All Ages and Stages takes the 4 prayers we shared with you today and combines them with 6 more, plus 50 more prayers that span the life of your child all the way through to adulthood. It's a comprehensive library of prayers for the everyday moments of your life as a mom.
With scripture-inspired prayers for purity, bath time, cleaning up, morning snuggles, administering discipline, when you disagree, school, managing your schedules, making wise choices, wisdom, service to the Lord, godly direction, specific times of the day, and so many more. We know Everyday Prayers for All Ages and Stages is going to be a resource you keep around for years to come. You can grab it now on Amazon or by following the link in our show notes.